I stared at the cracked bathroom mirror, my trembling fingers gently tracing the purplish-blue bruise blooming across my cheekbone. Derek's rage had become more volatile, his fists increasingly unforgiving. What was once an isolated incident had spiraled into a nightmarish routine. "Mom?" Ava's timid voice came from the other side of the door. "Are you okay?" Swallowing hard, I forced a smile, though she couldn't see it. "I'm fine, honey. Just give me a minute." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to burden my sweet daughter with the ugly truth. Derek's abuse had become our shameful secret, the elephant in the room we all tiptoed around. As I dabbed concealer over the discoloration, Derek's muffled shouts drifted up from downstairs. "Ava, get your ass down here and clean up this mess." My heart sank. Even when I was the target of his fury, somehow Ava ended up collateral damage. She didn't deserve this constant state of walking on eggshells. Steeling myself, I exited the bathroom, nearly colliding with Ava in the hallway. Her eyes were rimmed with unshed tears, and I pulled her into a fierce hug, shielding her from the vitriol echoing below. "Why does he hate me so much?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I stroked her hair, wishing I had an answer that could soothe her pain. "He doesn't hate you, baby. He's just troubled." Even as the words left my lips, I knew they rang hollow. Derek's issues ran far deeper than mere troubles. His cruelty was a poison seeping into every crevice of our lives. Releasing Ava, I squared my shoulders and headed downstairs, bracing myself for another confrontation. Derek stood in the kitchen, his face flushed with rage, surrounded by shattered plates and spilled food. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded, the words tumbling out before I could rein them in. He whirled on me, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Don't you dare talk to me like that, you ungrateful bitch. I work my ass off to provide for this family, and this is the thanks I get?" I flinched as he advanced, his meaty fists clenching at his sides. "Derek, please, not in front of Ava." "Oh, so now you're trying to turn my own daughter against me?" He sneered, his words laced with venom. "Maybe if you did a better job keeping this place clean, I wouldn't have to yell so much." My cheeks burned with shame and anger, but I held my tongue. Antagonizing him further would only make things worse. As Ava scurried past, her head bowed, I caught a glimpse of defiance flickering in her eyes. This couldn't go on. For her sake, if not my own, I had to find a way out of this living hell. Derek's fury was a raging wildfire, and we were all being consumed by the flames. The tension in our house was suffocating, like a thick smog blanketing every room. Derek's rage had only intensified since the kitchen incident, his insults and verbal lashings becoming more vicious by the day. I walked on eggshells, dreading the moment I'd inevitably set him off again. Ava, however, had stopped cowering. Her defiance towards Derek grew bolder, fueled by the hatred she could no longer conceal. "Did you seriously just talk back to me?" Derek roared one night after Ava sassed him about taking out the trash. She met his glare head-on, her jaw set in a hard line. "Maybe if you got off your lazy ass for once and helped around here, I wouldn't have to." The resounding slap echoed through the living room. My heart leapt into my throat as Ava clutched her stinging cheek, eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and fury. "You ungrateful little brat!" Derek towered over her, his face mottled with rage. "After everything I've done for this family—" "Done for us," Ava spat, cutting him off. "All you do is sit around barking orders and treating us like slaves." In that moment, I saw a frightening glimpse of the man I'd vowed to spend my life with. This raging, domineering monster was worlds away from the charming, loving Derek I'd fallen for all those years ago. "That's enough!" I stepped between them, shielding Ava with my body. "Derek, don't you dare lay another hand on her." His eyes narrowed to slits as he glared at me. "You're defending that disrespectful little bitch, after everything I've sacrificed?" "Sacrificed?" Ava scoffed from behind me. "Yeah, the couch must be real tough on your lazy ass." Derek lunged forward, but I held my ground, bracing for the inevitable impact. Just then, the front door burst open, and Tyler, Ava's boyfriend, rushed in. "Get away from them!" he shouted, inserting himself between us and Derek. For a split second, Derek looked taken aback by the unexpected interruption. Then his face contorted with fresh rage. "Who the hell do you think you are, boy? Get out of my house!" Tyler stood firm, his eyes locked on Derek's. "Not until you back off and leave Ava and Mrs. Davis alone." An unsettling silence fell over the room as Derek and Tyler engaged in a tense stare-down. I could practically see the wheels turning in Derek's head as he sized up the younger, fitter challenger. Finally, he stepped back, his chest heaving with exertion. "Fine. You want to play hero, kid? Don't say I didn't warn you." With that ominous parting shot, he stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. Trembling, I pulled Ava into my arms as Tyler hovered protectively nearby. "Thank you," I murmured, offering him a watery smile. He nodded grimly. "It's not right what he does to you two. We need to get you away from that psycho before he really hurts someone." As much as it pained me to admit it, Tyler was right. Derek's abuse had escalated beyond the point of no return. If we stayed, it was only a matter of time before his violence turned deadly. I had to find a way out, for Ava's sake if not my own. No matter how hopeless it seemed, I couldn't let Derek's venom poison our lives any longer. The days following Derek's blow-up with Tyler were tense and unnerving. He alternated between sullen silence and sudden outbursts, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. I found myself constantly on edge, bracing for the next explosion. Ava, for her part, had become even more defiant in the face of Derek's escalating hostility. She'd taken to spending as little time at home as possible, often staying out late with Tyler or her friends. I couldn't blame her. Our house had become a battlefield, and she was caught in the crossfire. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, Derek stormed into the kitchen, his face thunderous. "We need to talk," he growled, slamming his fist on the counter. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. "What is it?" "I lost my job today." The words came out through gritted teeth, as if it pained him to admit it. A flicker of relief coursed through me. At least this anger wasn't directed at me or Ava for once. "I'm so sorry, honey. What happened?" His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Don't play dumb with me. You know damn well what happened." My brow furrowed in confusion. "Derek, I swear I have no idea. Save it!" He cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Those bastards fired me for some bullshit about unethical business practices. Can you believe that?" A knot formed in the pit of my stomach as realization dawned. The late nights at the office, the unexplained cash influxes, the sudden bouts of paranoia, it all made sense now. "You were doing something illegal," I breathed, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek's face darkened, and for a heart-stopping moment, I thought he might strike me. "You're damn right I was. And you know why? Because those corporate assholes were screwing me over at every turn. I had to look out for myself and my family." By breaking the law, I shook my head in disbelief. "Derek, how could you be so reckless? What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about providing for you and that ungrateful brat," he roared, spit flying from his lips. "While you two sat on your asses all day, I was busting my ass to make sure we had a roof over our heads and food on the table." "Don't you dare bring Ava into this," I shot back, my fear momentarily overshadowed by a surge of maternal protectiveness. "She's just a kid, Derek. This is your mess, not hers." His eyes glinted with barely contained fury. "Oh, so now you're taking her side? After everything I've sacrificed for this family?" I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died on my tongue as Derek's meaty fist slammed into the counter, inches from where I stood. Dishes rattled, and I flinched instinctively, waiting for the inevitable blow, but it never came. Instead, Derek turned on his heel and stormed out of the kitchen, leaving a deafening silence in his wake. My hands trembled as I sank into a chair, my mind reeling from the revelation of Derek's crimes. How could the man I'd once loved become such a monstrous, violent stranger? And how could I protect Ava from the path of destruction he seemed hell-bent on dragging us down? As if on cue, Ava appeared in the doorway, her brow furrowed with concern. "Mom, what's going on? I heard yelling." I forced a tight smile, determined not to burden her with the full weight of Derek's betrayal. Not yet, at least. "It's nothing, honey. Your dad just had a rough day at work." Her eyes narrowed, seeing right through my flimsy lie. "Did he hurt you again?" The blatant accusation in her tone was like a slap to the face. Had Derek's abuse really become so normalized that my own daughter expected it? "No, baby, I'm fine," I assured her, pulling her into a fierce hug. "But we can't keep living like this. Things have to change." She tensed in my embrace, her body coiled like a spring. "Then let's get out of here, Mom. Away from him, for good." As much as I longed to whisk us away from Derek's toxic orbit, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. He'd never let us go without a fight, and given his recent transgressions, I shuddered to think how far he might go to keep his twisted vision of a family intact. Still, I couldn't deny the kernel of hope that took root in my chest as I held Ava close. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this nightmare after all. And I owed it to my daughter to find it, no matter what it took. In the days following Derek's explosive confession, a palpable shift occurred in our household dynamic. The tension was still there, that ever-present cloud of dread looming over us, but it was tinged with something new: determination. Ava had become my silent co-conspirator, her eyes burning with a resolve far beyond her 16 years whenever Derek's back was turned. I knew she was aching to escape his toxic orbit just as fiercely as I was. The key, we realized, was information, specifically digging into the details of Derek's misdeeds at work. If we could uncover the full extent of his illegal activities, it might give us the leverage we needed to break free without him dragging us down with him. That's where Tyler came in. One evening, while Derek was holed up in his study, Tyler slipped into the house through Ava's bedroom window. I'll admit, having my daughter's boyfriend sneak around gave me pause, but these were desperate times. You said Derek got fired for shady business stuff, right? Tyler wasted no time getting to the point as we huddled in the kitchen. What exactly did he do? I shook my head helplessly. I'm not sure of the details. He hasn't been forthcoming, and I'm too afraid to push him on it. Ava's eyes were steely. We need to find out. If we can prove he was doing illegal crap at work, maybe we can use that against him. Tyler nodded slowly. I might be able to help with that. My buddy's older brother works in corporate security. He has access to all kinds of confidential files and records. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile but insistent. You think he could dig up info on what Derek was into? It's worth a shot. Tyler's jaw was set in a hard line. I'll reach out to him tonight, see what I can find. True to his word, Tyler made some discreet inquiries through his friend's brother. Within a matter of days, we had a thick dossier detailing the sordid details of Derek's unethical business dealings: embezzlement, fraud, bribery. The charges ran the gamut of white-collar crime, each more damning than the last. My stomach churned as I pored over the documents, horrified by the depths of Derek's deception. This was it, the leverage we needed to break his stranglehold over our lives once and for all. With this evidence, I could expose him to the authorities and finally be rid of his toxic presence. Or so I thought. You're not seriously thinking of going to the cops, are you? Derek's gravelly voice made me jump as he materialized in the kitchen doorway. My heart plummeted into my stomach as I whirled to face him, the incriminating files clutched in my trembling hands. Ava and Tyler exchanged a wide-eyed look of panic from where they sat at the table. Derek's eyes narrowed to slits as he took in the scene. I can't believe this, he growled, shaking his head in disgust. My own wife plotting against me with her daughter's little boyfriend. You're both pathetic. Don't talk to them like that! The words burst from my lips before I could stop them. Emboldened by the weight of evidence against him, I straightened my spine and met his glare head-on. We know everything, Derek. The embezzlement, the fraud, all of it. Your lives of crime are over. For a long, tense moment, he was utterly still, his chest heaving with barely contained rage. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, snatching the files from my grasp and hurling them across the room in a flurry of scattered papers. You stupid bitch! He roared, advancing on me with balled fists. Did you really think you could take me down that easily? I'll bury you before I let you ruin me. Tyler was on his feet in an instant, positioning himself between Derek and the rest of us. That's enough. You're not laying another hand on them, you psycho. Derek threw back his head and laughed. A harsh, mocking sound that sent chills down my spine. And what are you going to do about it, tough guy? Huh? You got a set of balls big enough to take me on? In a flash, Derek's meaty fist connected with Tyler's jaw, sending the younger man staggering backward. Ava screamed, and I instinctively stepped in front of her, bracing for the brunt of Derek's fury. But it never came. Tyler had regained his footing, his eyes blazing with righteous anger as he launched himself at Derek with the ferocity of a cornered animal. The two men grappled viciously, trading blows and crashing into furniture as Ava and I looked on in horror. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Tyler gained the upper hand, pinning Derek to the floor with his forearm pressed against the older man's windpipe. "Call the cops," he rasped, his chest heaving with exertion. "It's over." Derek's eyes bulged, but he remained defiant, even in defeat. "You'll regret this," he choked out, glaring at me with undisguised loathing. "I'll make sure you regret this." As the wail of sirens pierced the night, I knew in that moment that Derek's threat was more than just bluster. By crossing this line, I'd unleashed a force that would stop at nothing to make me pay for my betrayal. And yet, as Tyler hauled Derek to his feet and the police swarmed into the kitchen, I felt an overwhelming sense of resolve solidifying in my gut. Derek's reign of terror was ending, one way or another, even if I had to sacrifice everything to make it happen. The aftermath of Derek's arrest was a whirlwind of chaos and emotion. As the police led him away in handcuffs, he fixed me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred that chilled me to the core. "This isn't over," he spat, his words dripping with venom. "You'll regret this, you lying bitch. I'll make sure of it." I shuddered at the menacing promise in his tone, but refused to let him see me flinch. After years of living under his dark cloud of abuse and manipulation, I was finally taking a stand. The officers were professional but thorough, as they questioned me about the evidence we'd uncovered against Derek. I laid it all out, the embezzlement schemes, the fraud, the violent outbursts, holding nothing back. For once, I wasn't going to cower or make excuses for his reprehensible behavior. Ava huddled beside me, her eyes wide and haunted, as Tyler recounted the explosive altercation that had led to Derek's takedown. I could see her struggling to process the enormity of what had transpired, the life-altering shift we'd just set in motion. When the questioning was finally over, the officers assured me they had more than enough to press charges against Derek for his white-collar crimes as well as the domestic violence incidents. Still, they cautioned that his high-powered lawyers would undoubtedly put up a fierce fight. "I'd strongly recommend getting a restraining order, ma'am," the detective told me grimly. "Guys like him don't take too kindly to having the rug pulled out from under them like this." I nodded, my throat tight, as much as part of me still recoiled at the thought of legally severing ties with the man I'd once loved. I knew it was the only way to keep us safe. The following days passed in a blur as I scrambled to get our affairs in order. With the help of a victim's advocate, I filed for an emergency restraining order against Derek, as well as initiating divorce proceedings. It was a daunting, emotionally draining process, made even more complicated by the looming threat of Derek's retaliation. Through it all, Ava and Tyler were my pillars of strength, rallying around me with an unwavering support that brought me to tears on more than one occasion. I'd never imagined my daughter's high school boyfriend would become such an invaluable ally, but Tyler had proven himself time and again with his loyalty and fierce protectiveness. "We've got your back, Mrs. Davis," he assured me one evening as we pored over the mounting stack of legal paperwork. "Derek's not going to be able to touch you or Ava, not as long as I'm around." His words should have been comforting, but they only served to deepen the pit of dread gnawing at my insides. Because as much as I appreciated Tyler's noble intentions, I knew we were dealing with a level of darkness and depravity that went far beyond what any of us could fully comprehend. Derek wasn't just some run-of-the-mill abuser. He was a venomous snake who'd stop at nothing to strike back at those who'd wronged him. And in his eyes, my betrayal was the ultimate unforgivable sin. Still, I refused to let my fear rule me any longer. For too many years, I'd walked on eggshells, tiptoeing around Derek's hair-triggered temper and volcanic mood swings. But not anymore. With each form I signed, each box I ticked, I felt a little piece of the shackles he'd bound me with falling away. I was taking back control of my life, of my future. And nothing, not even Derek's deranged thirst for vengeance, was going to stop me. The coup de grace came a few weeks later, when I made the decision to report Derek's transgressions to his former employer. Emboldened by the knowledge that he was already facing criminal charges, I gathered every shred of evidence I could find, emails, financial records, you name it, and forwarded it all to the corporate investigators. Their response was swift and decisive. Derek's actions, they assured me, represented a fundamental breach of company ethics and protocol. Not only would they be cooperating fully with the authorities in pursuing charges against him, but they would also be launching their own internal investigation that would undoubtedly lead to the clawing back of any ill-gotten gains. In that moment, as the weight of Derek's shattered professional life came crashing down around him, I felt an almost perverse sense of satisfaction. This was it, the ultimate revenge, the karmic retribution for all the pain and suffering he'd inflicted on me and my family. The monster was slain, the demon exorcised. And although a tiny, traitorous part of me mourned the man Derek used to be, the man I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, I knew there was no going back. Not after everything he'd done, not after the depths of evil he'd allowed to consume him. This was his reckoning, his just desserts, and I was the one delivering the killing blow. The days leading up to Derek's trial were some of the most nerve-wracking of my life. Despite the mountain of evidence stacked against him, his high-priced legal team was fighting tooth and nail, deploying every underhanded tactic in the book to try and discredit me and my testimony. "They're going to drag you through the mud, Mrs. Davis," the prosecutor warned me grimly. "Be prepared for some ugly character assassination attempts." I nodded, my jaw set in grim determination. After everything Derek had put me through, a few nasty courtroom theatrics weren't going to faze me. I was done being intimidated, done cowering in fear. True to the prosecutor's word, Derek's lawyers came out swinging from the moment the trial began. They painted me as a jilted, vindictive wife bent on destroying my husband out of spite. Accusations of infidelity and mental instability were thrown around with reckless abandon. Through it all, I kept my composure, refusing to rise to their taunts and provocations. I simply laid out the facts, cold and incontrovertible. The money trails, the forged documents, the eyewitness accounts of Derek's violent rages. Let the evidence speak for itself. When it was Derek's turn to take the stand, he was a portrait of feigned indignation, his eyes brimming with crocodile tears as he bemoaned the betrayal of his wife and daughter. He spun an intricate web of lies, casting himself as the long-suffering victim of a bitter, deranged woman hell-bent on ruining his life. I had to grip the bench in front of me to keep from leaping to my feet and calling him out on every despicable falsehood. Beside me, Ava was visibly shaking with rage, her hands balled into white-knuckled fists. Just when I thought I couldn't endure another second of Derek's Oscar-worthy performance, the prosecution dropped a bombshell. The corporate investigation into his financial misdeeds had unearthed even more damning evidence, including undeniable proof that he'd been siphoning funds into an offshore account for years. Derek's carefully constructed house of lies came crumbling down in an instant. His lawyers' objections were drowned out by the shocked murmurs rippling through the courtroom as the extent of his crimes was laid bare. I caught his eye from across the room, and for a split second the mask slipped, revealing the monster that lurked beneath. His face contorted into an ugly snarl, promising retribution. But in that moment, I felt nothing but a grim sense of vindication. This was justice, long overdue. In the end, the jury didn't need long to deliberate. Derek was found guilty on nearly every count: embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, and domestic violence charges. As the verdict was read, I could have sworn I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes as the realization hit him. He was going away for a long time. The courtroom erupted into pandemonium as the bailiffs moved in to take Derek into custody. He fought them every step of the way, howling obscenities and vile threats at me and Ava as we looked on, stunned into silence. "This isn't over, you lying bitch," he raged, spittle flying from his lips as the officers wrestled him toward the exit. "I'll get you for this if it's the last thing I do. You hear me? I'll destroy you." His words should have chilled me to the bone, struck fear into the core of my being. But in that moment, they rang hollow, devoid of their once potent power to terrorize me. Because as Derek was hauled away in chains, I knew the truth. He was the one who was destroyed. His lies, his cruelty, his depravity, they had all finally caught up with him, and he alone was the architect of his undoing. I pulled Ava into a fierce hug, holding her tight as the weight of Derek's shattered life came crashing down around us. She clung to me, her body racked with sobs of relief and release, the trauma of years of torment finally exorcised. For so long, we'd been little more than prisoners, suffocating under the oppressive weight of Derek's toxic presence. But now, finally, we were free. Free to rebuild, to heal, to reclaim the lives he'd so mercilessly tried to break. As the courtroom cleared and reality set in, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for the strength that had carried us through this brutal crucible. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but we'd walk it together, Ava and I, rising like a phoenix from the ashes of Derek's ruination. He'd had his chance at redemption, at being the man I'd once loved with every fiber of my being, but he'd squandered it, poisoned by his own hatred and hubris, until there was nothing left but a hollow, wretched shell. Now it was our turn to live, to embrace the future he'd tried so viciously to deny us. Derek's reign of terror was over, and although the scars would never fully heal, we were survivors. Victors. Justice had prevailed, and the demon was slain. In the aftermath of Derek's sentencing, an eerie sense of calm descended over our lives. It was as if a storm cloud that had lingered for years had finally dissipated, allowing the sun to peek through once more. Of course, the scars ran deep, both physical and emotional. Ava, in particular, struggled with the trauma of what we'd endured, her once sunny disposition giving way to bouts of withdrawal and anxiety. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she confided in me one night as we sat together on the porch, her knees hugged to her chest, like he's going to show up again and ruin everything. I reached over and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "That's never going to happen, baby. Derek's gone for good this time." She nodded, but the haunted look in her eyes told me the wounds were still raw, the fear of his return not so easily exorcised. We'd come so far, survived so much, but the damage he'd wrought wasn't something that could be healed overnight. That's when I knew we needed to make a change, to start fresh in a new environment, free from the toxic memories that lingered in every corner of our old home. A chance to begin again, on our own terms. It was a daunting prospect, uprooting our entire lives, leaving behind the familiar. But as I looked at my daughter, saw the fragility simmering beneath her surface bravado, I knew it was a risk we had to take. Within a matter of weeks, the wheels were in motion. I'd secured a new job and found us a cozy rental in a peaceful little town a few hours away, far enough to put real distance between us and the ghosts of our past, but still within driving range should we ever want to visit. Tyler, bless his heart, was our rock through the whole transition. He worked tirelessly alongside Ava and me, packing up our belongings and handling all the logistical nightmares that come with an interstate move. "You know I'm not going anywhere, right?" he murmured to Ava one evening as we collapsed on the couch, utterly spent from a long day of hauling boxes. "Wherever you guys end up, I'm coming with." She smiled, the first genuine, uninhibited smile I'd seen from her in longer than I could remember, and leaned her head against his shoulder. "I know, I couldn't do this without you." My heart swelled at the tender exchange. After all the ugliness and toxicity we'd endured, it was a poignant reminder that love could still blossom, even in the most barren of landscapes. The day we finally left our old home behind, it was as if a physical weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I barely looked back as we pulled away, our belongings crammed into the moving truck, ready to start anew. The drive to our new town was a much-needed chance to decompress and reflect. Ava and Tyler rode together, trading hushed conversations and giddy laughter that warmed my heart. As for me, I let my mind wander, replaying the turbulent journey that had brought us to this pivotal juncture. The years of suffering and degradation at Derek's hands, the agonizing decision to turn him in, the grueling legal battles and the soul-crushing court drama. It had been a long, brutal road, littered with emotional landmines and psychological scarring. But we'd made it through to the other side, bloody but unbowed, our bond as a family forged anew in the fires of our shared trauma. When we finally rolled into our new neighborhood, I couldn't help but feel a surge of hope and possibility swelling in my chest. This was it, our clean slate, our chance to rewrite our story on our own terms. There would undoubtedly be more challenges ahead, more demons to confront as we navigated the long road to healing. But at least now, we wouldn't be going it alone. As Ava and Tyler excitedly scampered through our new home, mapping out their living spaces and dreaming of fresh starts, I knew in my heart that we'd be okay. The darkness was behind us, the nightmare finally over. From this day forward, we would face the future together. Bruised, perhaps, but stronger than ever before. Derek's toxic legacy would be confined to the past where it belonged, a faded specter no longer wielding any power over our lives. We were survivors, warriors. And as I drank in the warm, welcoming embrace of our new sanctuary, I silently vowed that no force on earth would ever threaten to break us again. The years seemed to slip by in a warm, comforting blur after our move. With each passing day, week, month, the shadows of our past grew a little more faint, replaced by the golden glow of new memories and fresh beginnings. Ava blossomed like a desert flower after a soaking rain. Gone was the haunted, withdrawn girl who'd arrived in our new town, replaced by a confident, radiant young woman with a newfound zest for life. Her relationship with Tyler only grew stronger, their bond forged in the crucible of our shared trauma. I'll never forget the proud swell in my chest the day she walked across the stage at graduation, her eyes shining with hard-won triumph. As she accepted her diploma, I could almost see the weight of Derek's poisonous influence slipping from her shoulders. From that day forward, she was in control of her own destiny, no longer a victim, but a victor defining her own path. Of course, there were still challenges to face in those early years of our fresh start. We all struggled with the emotional fallout from Derek's abuse, the invisible scars that no amount of distance could fully heal. Therapy helped, providing a safe space for us to unpack the tangled web of hurt and anger that had become woven into the fabric of our family. And although the road was long and arduous, with many setbacks and difficult truths to confront, we walked it side by side, supporting each other every step of the way. My own journey led me to an unexpected calling: advocacy work for victims of domestic violence and spousal abuse. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, lending whatever support and guidance I could based on my own hard-won wisdom. The first time I shared my story with a group of survivors, it was like a lead weight had been lifted from my heart. There was a raw, primal power in finally giving voice to the anguish Derek had inflicted, of stripping away the shame and silence that had shackled me for so long. As the months and years rolled on, my role within the organization grew. What had started as a few volunteer hours here and there blossomed into a fully fledged position as a counselor and community liaison, helping others find their way out of the darkness, just as I once had. The work was emotionally draining at times, forcing me to continually confront the demons of my past, but it was also profoundly rewarding, a tangible way of transforming my own suffering into a force for positive change. And through it all, my family, my wonderful, resilient family, was by my side, cheering me on and buoying my spirit whenever the weight became too heavy to bear alone. Ava, for her part, flourished in our new environment, free from the oppressive cloud of her father's toxicity. Before long, she and Tyler had settled into their own place just a few blocks away, giving them the independence they craved while still keeping us tantalizingly close. "You'd better not be empty nesters already," Tyler would joke whenever I dropped by for an impromptu visit, pulling me into one of his trademark bear hugs. "We're not getting rid of you two that easily." His playful teasing was a balm for the soul, a reminder that the cycle of abuse and trauma could be broken, that life and laughter could blossom from even the most barren of wastelands. And sure enough, not long after, Ava and Tyler welcomed a baby of their own into the world, a perfect little bundle of joy who became the shining beacon for our family's hard-won redemption. Holding my granddaughter in my arms for the first time, I was struck by the magnitude of how far we'd come. From the depths of Derek's reign of terror to this, a new generation unburdened by the sins of the past, growing up in an environment of unconditional love and support. In that moment, I made a silent vow that this innocent child would never know the pain and fear that had once been my constant companions. She would be raised in a world where safety and trust were givens, not fleeting luxuries. The demons had been banished, the shackles of our former lives finally shattered. We were free to live, to love, to forge ahead into the great unknown with our heads held high. Derek's shadow no longer lingered, a distant and rapidly fading memory. In its place, a brilliant new dawn had crested over our family, ushering in an era of healing and renewal. The nightmare was over. We had survived. And as I drank in the adoring smiles of my daughter and grandson-in-law, I knew that our story, one of courage, perseverance, and ultimate triumph over darkness, had only just begun.